Story 1. It seems that the nurse from my previous post has decided she no longer cares about her job, now that her contract is nearing its end. Now, to set the scene, my mother works at a state-run pharmacy that supplies medication and equipment to public home care teams. She does not have a medical degree, so some details might be a little unclear, but I will do my best to explain according to her account. There is a patient, a child, who is fed through a sterile system involving tubes. I am not sure whether it is a machine or something else, but it requires strict maintenance. Every week, the nurses' team visits the child's home to check on the setup and perform any necessary adjustments. Since the nurse is the highest-ranking member of the team, unless a doctor is needed, she is responsible for making decisions and has the final say. However, she is still expected to follow proper protocol. During this particular visit, as they were finishing their work, the nurse noticed bubbles in the tubes. This is a serious issue because, according to protocol, she should have called an ambulance immediately to transport the child to a hospital where the feeding system could be properly reinstalled. Instead of following procedure, she broke the sterile environment and manually removed the bubbles herself. As if that was not risky enough, knowing that this could cause an imbalance in the child's blood sugar levels, she took the glucose monitoring device from the team's medical kit and handed it to the child's mother. She then instructed her that if any problems arose, she should call an ambulance, but only then. The problem is that this device is state property. It is not supposed to be given to patients, as other home care teams might need it. As far as I know, such equipment can only be left in a patient's home if a formal request is approved by higher authorities. However, the nurse did not inform anyone about what she had done. Instead, she stayed silent for an entire week while the pharmacy staff searched frantically for the missing device. The place was already disorganized, and the loss of state-owned medical equipment only added to the chaos. Accusations were being thrown around, and no one had any idea where the device had gone. Her actions only came to light a week later when one of the nurse technicians happily informed the pharmacy staff that they had found the device at the child's home. Naturally, they questioned the child's mother, who unknowingly shared the entire story, not realizing that the nurse's actions had not only put her child at risk of a blood sugar imbalance, but had also exposed him to potential infection due to the breach of the sterile system. This woman is a serious liability, in my opinion. I have more stories about her, and maybe I will share them later. Unfortunately, unless something truly severe happens, there seems to be nothing that can be done about her. Hopefully, her contract will never be renewed. Story 2. When we bought the house and moved in 3 years ago, we accepted the location of the mailbox. It was on the other side of our driveway, across some uneven ground, about 50 yards away from the door. At the time, this wasn't a problem, but since then, we've had a string of bad luck. My wife needed a new knee, I sprained an ankle, and while it has healed enough for me to walk on and return to work, anyone who has experienced an injury like that knows it can take a while before it feels completely normal again. So, we decided that the mailbox ought to be moved to the end of our path, near the street straight ahead, on a flat and smooth surface, and only about 30 feet away. We asked the post office what we needed to do to relocate the mailbox. They told us all we had to do was inform the mail carrier that it was being moved and ensure it was properly numbered to match the house so there would be no confusion. We went to the store to buy a new one since the old one was looking worn out from getting hit a couple of times, and we installed the new mailbox over the weekend. By sheer luck, we caught the mail carrier while installing it and were able to tell her directly about the change. She acknowledged it, and that was that situation handled. Installation went smoothly, and now we moved on to part 2, removing the old mailbox. This is where things got complicated. The old mailbox was mounted on the same post as my neighbors, who lived across the street and one house over. During the last election, I hadn't displayed any signs supporting either of the candidates, but my neighbor, John, not his real name, had his yard covered with half a dozen signs, flags, and even a large banner in support of a particular candidate. As I was removing the old mailbox, John came over and immediately started complaining. He insisted that the only reason I was doing this was because I didn't support the candidate he backed, claiming that this was my petty little reason and that I just didn't want to be associated with him. Now, to be honest, I didn't want to be associated with him, but that had nothing to do with politics. Long before we even knew his political views, he wasn't exactly a pleasant person. When I walked my dog, he would yell at me to keep that mud off my yard, even though I was on my side of the street. He also called animal control on me multiple times, claiming that my chickens were running loose in his yard, when in reality, it was his neighbor to the right who had the chickens. I don't own any chickens, although I did buy a used chicken coop once because it turned out to be a great enclosure for my wife's Angora rabbits. So, I could understand some minor confusion there. We used to wave to him like we did with any other neighbor we saw outside, but he never waved back. Instead, he would go out of his way to avoid acknowledging us, always pretending to look at something anything other than us. The only time he seemed to pay attention was when we had our dog with us. Then, he would watch us like a hawk, making sure we didn't step anywhere near his lawn. Honestly, we had disliked him long before we knew who he supported politically. I explained our medical situation and how the walk through uneven ground had become difficult, just as I mentioned earlier. However, he wasn't interested in hearing it. He even threatened to call the homeowners association. The problem with that? We don't have a homeowners association. We have a neighborhood association, but all they do is collect voluntary donations for snow removal and mosquito control. I finished removing the old mailbox, went back inside, and decided I would ignore John from that point on. Story 3. Firstly, I am not sure if this belongs here or not, but I had to share. For some background, I had worked as a CSR, customer service representative, for almost 20 at various companies and had always taken my job seriously and made sure that I had taken care of every customer with politeness and within the policies of the company I was working for. I am now disabled with severe mental health issues. I am also a coupon nut. I am on a very tight budget and the discount they provide is very helpful. Mostly I buy bulk amounts of food, cleaning supplies, and paper products because it reduces the number of times I have to go to the store. Any heavy items I have to get, however, are delivered to my home. The best I ever did in coupon savings is when I got about $250 in groceries etc. for $125 or so. On this particular occasion, I had gotten my coupons from a website. This happened a while ago, so this is not going to be precise, but to the best of my memory, which is pretty good. So at the time when this happened, I didn't have a car, and buses were so hard for me because of anxiety. Uber and Lyft were just too expensive. My friend had given me a ride for a blood test, and I asked if she would be cool with stopping at Fry's afterward because I needed a few things. She agreed, telling me that we have to pick up her daughter, so it has to be fast. No problem. I got my coupons together, and she came and picked me up after work. With the blood test done, amazingly I didn't faint. I hate needles. We went to Fry's. We rushed through the store, grabbing what we needed, since she needed stuff too, and went to the checkout. This is when the nightmare began. Everything was scanned and bagged up, so I handed over my coupons. There are two ways they scan. I think most stores do this now, the table scanner and the hand scanner. He swiped the first coupon and nothing. I was confused. This shouldn't be happening, and I guess the look on my face was enough for this guy to start being a jerk. If I can't scan them, then I am sorry, I can't take them. The customer service representative said in a firm tone. That is so weird. I have been using them at many different Fry's over the years and have never had an issue. Well, they aren't working, and you need to pay and go. You're holding up the line. Can you please try the hand scanner? Well, if they are not scanning that way, then it won't scan with a hand one. If you are going to be this rude, you are going to be asked to leave the store. My friend and I at this point look at each other very confused. I kept a light tone of voice, and I don't see how I was rude. Well, he looks at me waiting for me to move. This is where I can fully admit I turned into a Karen, but only a little bit. I could have been oh so much worse. You have got to be kidding me. I think I need to speak with your manager because you are just being totally rude and unprofessional. My friend is absolutely confused and shocked because I am a very easygoing person and honestly don't have a mean bone in my body. I was taught growing up about how you get more with honey rather than vinegar. We waited patiently, and I had a stern look on my face as we waited, and I could see that some of the people were waiting to see what happens next. The manager got there pretty quickly, and her body language was relaxed, and I knew she was going to be diplomatic. What happened next was simply unbelievable. I have tried every coupon she handed me, they won't scan, and was insistent that they should. Wow, and you easily lie to your manager. You didn't scan all of them, you scanned 3 of them. What kind of person are you? Now my friend has the most shocked look on her face, and other people are still wrapped up in the situation. I am pretty sure that they were waiting for me to throw a punch or slap him. That guy wasn't worth the assault charge. The manager, trying to get control over the situation, asked, "Why don't you go ahead and take a break, and I will take care of the line?" He grunted and walked away, cursing under his breath. She is right, he didn't. When she asked to try the hand scanner, he refused. My friend told the manager, "Oh, I will try it myself now." She grabbed the hand scanner and beeped the coupon was accepted. Really? I am sorry, I am angry. I have worked in customer service at several different companies, and I know sometimes it really sucks, but his attitude was horrible. He seems like a very angry old man. I guessed him to be in his 60s or 70s. His attitude was inexcusable. I am so sorry this happened, and he should not have done that. You are right, he will be counseled about this. By this time I had calmed down and smiled at her. The only reason I was angry is because of how rude he was. I have never been treated like that. After this, I slid my card after my total was up, and I thought I was done, or so I thought. My friend checked out and we went to the car. We loaded up the car and I was about to take the basket back to the front of the store, but my friend said she would do it since the man was in front smoking. When she came back, she was shaking her head and said, "You know that guy was hanging around his co-workers complaining about you and calling you names." That got me all sorts of angry again, but I took some breaths and calmed myself since really there is nothing I can do about it at that point. I did call the corporate office to let them know what happened to add the fact that he referred to me with a certain cuss word. Side note, my friend did tell me how shocked she was because she had never seen me angry before, and she hoped I would never turn that fury on her. I assured her I wouldn't unless it was something that really ticked me off. Later that night, we laughed hard about it. She called me the Great Fury for quite a while after that. Story 4. I was visiting Truckee, California, over the weekend. There's a great little fishing spot where I tend to find trophy-sized brown trout on the west end of Donner Lake. I carry a 2-rod fishing license, which allows me to cast bait on one rod while using lures on the other. It's also important to note that the bridge in that area has a sign that clearly states, "No jumping or diving from the bridge." So anyway, I'm at this spot under the bridge, casting out. It's been a slow day, and I haven't caught anything yet. No big deal, though it's just nice to be out on the water, especially with everything going on in the world. Every now and then, a paddleboarder or kayaker drifts by, gives a friendly wave, and turns around since there isn't much clearance under the bridge. They also respect the fact that I'm fishing there and don't want to disturb the area. Then, out of nowhere, this little kid shows up. I didn't even see him at first. He starts jumping off the bridge into the water. As you can imagine, I'm not thrilled. Any chance I had of catching fish just vanished for the next few hours. Fish are easily frightened, and something as disruptive as jumping off a bridge sends them scattering. Admittedly, I wasn't the most polite, but I told the kid he needed to stop and leave. This wasn't the place for that, and he wasn't welcome to jump in where I was fishing. I was standing on the shoreline, not the bridge itself, when suddenly, a woman from above starts yelling at me. Turns out, it was his mother, and she was furious. She shouts that her son can do whatever he wants. I, again not too politely, point out the sign that clearly says no jumping from the bridge. Her kid jumps again, completely ignoring the rule. Then, she tells me I need to stop fishing there instead. She claims they were there first, and that I was violating their privacy by not maintaining a proper distance from them. At this point, I decide to take a short video of the kid jumping off the bridge, about 5 minutes of footage, just in case things escalate. I tell her, absolutely not, and continue casting out my line. Well, as luck would have it, her kid jumps right into my lure. Not immediately, it was probably his 10th jump, while his mother and I were still arguing. I was using a size 6 hook, which is about an inch long, and it embedded itself right into the kid's leg. Naturally, he panics and fails to swim back to shore safely. Instead of keeping calm, he flails around, which only drives the hook deeper into his leg and snaps my fishing line. When he finally makes it back to the shore, sure enough, my lure is sticking out of his leg. There's a little trickle of blood, but getting hooked like that isn't usually too serious. The real issue is the barb on the hook, which prevents it from coming out easily. At this point, his mother comes rushing down, screaming that I assaulted her child. She immediately calls the police while frantically trying to pull the lure out herself. She also lets me know that she'll make sure I'm held responsible for any lasting damage. I just stand there and watch because it's obvious she has no idea what she's doing. In her panic, she's only making things worse. I warn her, but she refuses to listen. At this point, it's her problem, not mine. About 15 minutes later, the police arrive, and I'm still casting out my lures, completely unfazed. I already know how this is going to go. The mother immediately starts lying to the officers, claiming that I was deliberately casting my fishing line at her son, and that they had been there first, swimming and enjoying their time. She paints me as some reckless fisherman who intentionally hurt a child. When the officers approach me, I don't say much. I simply show them my valid fishing licenses, my fishing setup, and, most importantly, the video of her son repeatedly jumping off the bridge. I let the footage speak for itself. Here's the thing: intentionally interfering with a fisherman is actually a serious offense. The officers review my video, see the lure still lodged in the boy's leg, and acknowledge that I'm fishing there legally. More importantly, they see that the only clear rule violation is the one the kid committed jumping off a bridge where it was explicitly prohibited. They go back to his mother, who, under pressure, admits that she might have allowed him to jump off a few times. That's all the officers need to hear. They inform her that she has committed a crime and that I have the right to press charges against her if I choose to do so. The woman stares at me in shock, as if she can't believe she's the one in trouble. Then, she starts yelling again, accusing me of permanently injuring her child. I calmly tell her again, not very politely, that I won't press charges if I get my lure back within the next 10 minutes. A task I know is nearly impossible given the way the hook is embedded. Determined not to let me win, she starts yanking at the lure herself, refusing any assistance. What follows is 10 minutes of her putting her poor kid through absolute misery, trying to rip the hook out with no idea how to do it properly. The more she struggles, the worse she makes it for him. In the end, I never got my lure back, and true to my word, I decided to press charges. The police placed the woman in handcuffs and called for paramedics to properly remove the hook from the boy's leg. I'm not sure what happened to them afterward, but I do know one thing: I never got my lure back. Not that it was a big deal. It only cost about $4, though I don't like losing money, especially when fishing is a primary food source for me. I wish I could end on a happier note and say I caught a fish that day, but I didn't. I did, however, manage to collect about 2 pounds of crawfish, so at least there was that. Also, this kind of thing isn't uncommon. It happens all the time: random kids messing with fishermen while we're trying to fish. They throw rocks, jump into the water near our lines, and generally disrupt the process. Most of them don't realize the impact they're having and leave once we explain, but some are just entitled troublemakers. Story 5. For 18 months I'd been working from home, as most of us had. From a work perspective, this has been great. I've been more productive than when I'm in the office, been able to work more flexible hours, and have saved a ton of money by not commuting. My workplace had an agreement that those working from home can do what hours they want, so long as we are able to answer urgent calls in core hours and we get all our work done. Fair enough as far as I'm concerned. For 16 months this worked great, as above. Then over a few weekends I had to clear out of the house and took pictures of all the items that are in good condition, but we no longer want, with a view to giving it away to whoever wants it. One day when I'm working from home, I take my lunch break, make a quick sandwich, and post the items that I'm giving away on one of those local Facebook free pages. I didn't know it at the time, but one of the managers, called Shambles henceforth, from my workplace, was also signed up to that page, and he saw my post. He then took it upon himself to go to the owner of the company and tell him that I was slacking off and posting on Facebook during work hours. For context, this wasn't my boss, who was super chill so long as everything was done on time. Nor was the complaint to my boss, but to the owner of the company. We're a big business, so there's a lot of people in the chain of command between me and the owner. And to top it off, I've been doing a lot of work for Shambles. He'd outsourced the running of entire projects to me over the last 18 months, all of which I'd executed well and he'd taken ample credit for. And this was the only time in 18 months I'd posted anything on Facebook, because I never post. So the owner contacted me, and to be fair, he's a decent guy. The conversation went like this. I've been told you're posting on Facebook during work hours. Just be smart about it. It doesn't look good when colleagues see it. He tells me. I completely understand. Just so you know, I posted that during my lunch break. I was told you were posting at noon. The company lunch break is usually 1-2. I did, but that's because when I'm home working, I always take my lunch 12-1. Okay? I don't have an issue with that. Just keep your head down. Like I said, a decent guy. I wasn't really in trouble, and the owner didn't seem to care. But then I started to think, wait, who has gone to the owner with this in the first place? Long story short, a coworker, who was working on site that day, heard on the grapevine that Shambles had been complaining to the owner about me, and how I'm always on social media when I should be working. I literally only have Facebook, and I only use that for Messenger 99% of the time. Cue petty revenge. As I said before, Shambles likes to outsource work to me. I never minded this. The work was varied, and it broke the week up. Plus, my own boss didn't mind as I always had my work for him done on time. However, I never got recognition for this extra work. For 2 years I managed a sub-department completely on my own because he didn't have time to do it. I didn't get a penny more for it, but it was a good group of people and I enjoyed getting experience of management. Well, after this, every time Shambles came to me with an issue, I would say I was super swamped, but that I'd try to deal with it if I had time. The projects he tried to outsource to me I immediately rejected, saying that I had a full plate from my actual job, and that sub-department I ran. We'll get to that. Over the next couple of months, Shambles starts missing his deadlines. Issues come up with existing projects that he hasn't fixed, and employees are complaining that every time they go to him with an issue, it doesn't get resolved. It dawns on me at this point that I've basically been doing this guy's job for him for years. Screw that. I set up a meeting with my boss and put forward my arguments for why I should be promoted, or really, why I should have been ages ago. I point to all the projects I've successfully run as well as the sub-department I've managed for 2 years. He completely agrees and says he'll take it to his boss. Now somehow, I don't know how, but when I go to the next meeting with my boss's boss, Shambles is there too. He's on the same level in the company as my boss's boss. A little phased, but not willing to give up. I put my arguments forward to them. Shambles lets me finish, then proceeds to tell me that I don't know enough about our work to manage. I don't have the required people skills, and then he tells me, and this is verbatim. Besides, people here don't respect you. They respect me. I know I'm a good manager. If you really think about it, you know you wouldn't be. I forget what else was said after that, but I was completely destroyed. Boss's boss comes up to me afterwards and tells me that Shambles is annoying. But unfortunately, he's got the approval of the higher-ups, so what he says has too much sway for him to go against him. I tell boss's boss that if that's the way it is, I'm going to look for other employment. He sighs and says, I don't blame you. Q Pro Revenge. During the time it took me to look for and apply to other jobs, I have time to think about how I can get back at Shambles. He's used me for years and is now blocking my promotion. I'd already stopped working on his stuff and his projects were going from bad to worse, but I needed something more. Now this next part could be an entire post on its own, so I've bulleted it for brevity. If you want more context, I can write it out later. I'm an accredited internal auditor for our quality systems. I ask if I can be assigned a couple of last audits before I leave to help them out. I carry out these audits, and using my intimate knowledge of Shambles projects, I find every single issue I can. A number of people also hate Shambles and give me more dirt on him. Someone gives me breakthrough information that Shambles has been forging signatures and bypassing multiple company procedures to make his KPIs look better. I write up the report with tons of evidence attached and send it off. The report gets flagged at the highest level because of what it shows. Shambles get dragged over the coals. I wish I could say this story ends with the Shambles getting fired and having to sell his body on the street for scraps. But obviously, using all the connections he has, he keeps his job. I later found out, though, that he was due a massive promotion, as in, catapulted to the top of the company, running whole divisions kind of thing. That never happened, though. With his declining numbers as well as a bad audit, showing all his shortcomings, he's basically told he'll never progress beyond where he is, and that he's lucky to have a job at all. He still works there, and I'm told his ego has been taken down a whole washing line worth of pegs. As for me, I'd love to say I got a better job with a massive raise. That's half true. I decided to pursue my dream job, literally, since I've been a kid, dream job, in a totally different industry. All the experience I had counted in my favor, and although I took a bit of a pay cut, I've never enjoyed work more. Oh, in that sub-department I was running. They knew that when I left, Shambles would take over running them again. So in my last month at the company, I gave them all tutorials on how to search for jobs and pass interviews. I'd worked in recruitment previously. I've heard from a number of them since that they'd landed better jobs and thanked me in part for it. It may not be the most perfect ending, but I'm very happy with it. Story 6. To start off this story, let me paint the picture. I work for a railway company where we have strict, although slightly outdated, safety procedures. During departure, we have to signal the driver that everything is okay and he can depart, but this has to be done from the platform. This means that in between the all clear and the actual departure, there still is one door open for us staff to get back on. However, no one else is still allowed to board the train anymore. Also, sometimes on lines where we often run into trouble, we get a security team to come along with us as well, as was the case in this story. So I start the departure procedure, and after signaling the driver, I see someone still running towards my door, so I shout at him that boarding is already over and he cannot get on anymore. But he kept running, so I thought he simply didn't hear me, so I shouted again right before I closed the door, making the security team check out what the yelling was about. He again ignores the warning and sticks his arm between the door, making the safety boarder open the door again. You won't get stuck between the doors, but it does still hurt quite a bit, and in most cases leaves visible bruises should you get caught between the doors. So me, being somewhat pissed off about this, started telling him how dangerous it is what he just did. If the train left while he was getting on, he would have fallen under the train, risking injury, dismemberment, and worse. Let alone the delays caused by police investigations, cleanup, and possible traumas for the passengers and other staff members that may find the body. Turns out he was a journalist, and the conversation went like this. I'm a journalist. I had to catch this train to go to destination for a story. As a journalist, you should be even more aware of the dangers given you write stories about the outcome. Dangers of what? I didn't do anything. Sir, you ignored multiple warnings, jumped in between a closing door, and forced your way into a departing train. I did no such thing. You can't prove anything. Sir, I'll need your ID to make a determination of what happened. We don't give out fines, we make a determination, and based on that a legal team issues the actual fines. You don't need to make a determination. Nothing happened. You can't prove anything. Sir, I saw you. That's already enough to make a declaration, and to back me up, we also have camera footage of the station and 2 witness reports of these security officers accompanying me. Your ID, please. No, I'm not required to give it to you. You're right, you're not required, but if you don't cooperate, I'm going to have to call the police to escort you out and determine your identity that way. Just make it easy on yourself, sir. The security guy tells him. Fine. He then grabs his ID and throws it at me. Whoa, calm down, sir. We're all just doing our job and ensuring the safety of this train. I write the determination and give his copy to him. I know a lot of people. This isn't the end of this. He then stormed off, insulting us under his breath. Me and the security officers sit down and have a laugh about the situation. Later, I wrote an internal statement of what happened to add to the dossier. A few weeks later, my district manager asked me to come visit him in his office, which I thought was very weird because normally everything gets relayed through local managers. He explained that one of my passengers had filed an official complaint against me and was also pressing charges. I was baffled. I sat there in complete disbelief. It took about a minute of silence to put the pieces together in my mind and briefly explain to my boss what happened and that he could read the full version in the dossier. He believed me and directed me to someone that could help me get a case together, and I even got a lawyer assigned by my company. A few more weeks went by, and I was asked to go to my lawyer's office to meet up with the other party in a neutral environment to try and find common ground before going to court. And lo and behold, there was the journalist sitting with a smug smile on his face, suing me for denying him access to public places and as cherry on top assault. He used the bruises of the door to say I assaulted him, saying, "Told you it wasn't the end of it." Despite his lawyer's advice to drop the charges, he still wouldn't budge. A few more weeks went by, and I went to court with all the evidence and the 2 security officers as witnesses. The actual trial went over pretty quickly, seeing his only argument was I assaulted him, and the security tape and witnesses made it really easy to deny that ever happened. I don't know what happened to the guy after the trial, but it was clearly visible that the judge didn't like him lying in court. In the end, he still had to pay the fine and all the costs of court. And now that the initial shock of being sued and the trial is over, I can't help but laugh about how stupid this entire thing actually was, and I still wonder how he actually believed he could sue me with a lie and get away with it despite me literally telling him all the evidence we had beforehand. Dude, wherever you are, and whatever happened to you, I hope you learned to be respectful and to admit your mistakes and live with their consequences. And readers, if you want to take the train, save us staff the troubles and just arrive on time.